to the T2 Center's Coffee and Conversation, Boots on the Ground and Eyes in the Sky, a year of lessons from a public works drone program. Today's presenter is Aaron Scurlock. Aaron joined the city of Danbury as a staff engineer at the beginning of 2024 and became an FAA licensed drone pilot in April 2025. Originally from North Salem, New York, he graduated from the University of Connecticut with a degree in civil engineering in 2020. Before beginning his engineering career, Aaron spent several years working in his family's woodworking company. Outside of work, Aaron enjoys spending time outside doors, following car racing, and caring for his two dogs, a beagle named Pasta and a miniature dachshund named Patch. Aaron is also a member of the Cohort 10 Connecticut Transportation Leadership Program, where this initiative serves as his Pay It Forward project, reflecting his commitment in giving back to the transportation community. Aaron, it is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Regina. Can everybody see my presentation?
It looks good.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you again for the introduction, Regina. My name is Aaron Scurlock from the city of Danbury, and I'm very excited to be here this morning and talk to you all about drones in Danbury and my experiences over the last year. So before we get into the content, before we get into the pictures this morning, I want to start with an inspirational quote and a couple of questions here to the audience. So John Hermes Secondary is quoted as saying, "Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward." I personally love this quote. I found this while doing the research for this presentation, and it honestly didn't occur to me until this morning when I was coming in that the reference to having your eyes turned skyward played even better into my presentation and our title here. So with that, I want to open up a couple of questions to the audience here. Ask how many audience members have used drones before, personally or professionally, and ask the audience how many members are currently looking into purchasing a drone for their department or agency. So I'll give everybody just a moment here to put in some answers to that, and we will see what the audience thinks. While that's all filtering in here, I'll briefly cover our agenda here for the morning. We're going to go in and briefly discuss the FAA Part 107 regulations around drones, talk about our program here in Danbury and the equipment that we use. Then we'll get into some of the experience I've had over the last year, the 3 most challenging areas that I identified, and then the plan going forward, where we're heading with this program.
Okay, we're going to pull up the results.
Perfect. So our poll has come in even results across the board. So for the first question, how many audience members have used drones before? We got 46% answering yes and 54% answering no. So pretty close to even. And it looks like for the second question, how many audience members are looking into drones? It looked like that was about the same thing. Just a little bit more no answers than yes. Okay, very good. That's interesting. I was really interested to see the answer to this. There's not a ton of news talk about drones in public works specifically. So I was curious to see sort of what the saturation level is and how much experience all of you really have with drones. So that being said, let's get into it. So Part 107 is the FAA regulation that covers commercial drone operations. So a Part 107 certification is needed for any commercial use of a drone, work, business, basically anything that generates compensation, even down to the level of something like taking promotional scenery videos and things like that to post them on YouTube for monetary profit. That falls within the realm of Part 107, is regulated by the FAA, and requires pilot licensure to be able to fly. So the limits of Part 107, what it stipulates to us is that small unmanned aircraft weighing greater than 0.55 pounds and less than 55 pounds are regulated by the FAA. They're to be operated in visual line of sight. So that really means line of sight with your eyes. Binoculars are allowed to be used for situational awareness, but they're not suitable to maintain your visual line of sight during a flight. So at all points when we're flying, we have to make sure that the drone is directly within our line of sight. And we'll get into a little bit more how we manage that with our team members and leveraging them during an operation. In terms of the flight limits under Part 107, you're permitted to fly to 400 feet above ground level, referred to as AGL, since this is the FAA and it has to be alphabet soup. What that means for us is that it's 400 feet above the ground from where we take off in a standard operation, but the FAA acknowledges that this is intended to be used for things like inspection of towers, structures, things like in this video right here, flagpole on Main Street in Danbury, doing an orbit flight around. So we're allowed to fly 400 feet above the ground, but also 400 feet above any structure in a 400-foot radius. So what that means, for example, is if we're doing an inspection of a tower that's 1,000 feet tall, under the FAA rules, we're permitted to fly to 1,400 feet above ground level with approval. Beyond that, the weather requirements for flying, you need to have at least 3 miles of visibility, so fairly clear skies. It is possible to fly in poorer weather and with clouds around, which we'll discuss a little bit later, but it's a requirement to maintain a 500-foot separation from the clouds, 500 feet below the clouds. So in tandem with that 400-foot maximum altitude, the minimum cloud ceiling for us to fly is 900 feet. As well, the FAA rules do stipulate that flight over people is permitted, but prolonged flight over bystanders is not. So passing over someone who's not a part of the operation is not a problem, but we can't hover over them for any period of time. To do operations like that, a waiver would be required. A great example that came to my mind in this towards that and the waivers is, I assume without having to run any poll for it, there's probably a few NFL fans around here in the audience. So some of them over the past couple of years may have noticed that drone footage has started to become featured into the broadcast. We see these high altitude shots over the stadium looking down, fast flying, following the action, the ball and the players. And so those operations are also regulated as Part 107. They have to file a waiver with the FAA to do that, fly over crowds. And as part of that, the FAA rules mandate that if you fly over crowds with a waiver, some kind of physical means of preventing the drone from falling and striking someone has to be in place. So that could be, for example, something like a parachute. In the NFL example, they use tethers. So you'll see from the standard camera shots, wires that cross the stadium. The drones that fly there are all operating tethered to a wire, and those prevent them from falling and hitting the crowd. So with that, I'm going to move forward here, talk a little bit about our Danbury program. So I do have to give a little bit of a shout out here to Tom Hughes. He's our program head ultimately and the progenitor of this program. So big shout out to him for this, for bringing this all into fruition and making this a possibility for me to be here today with you. So in Danbury, our story with drones began about 6 years ago during the COVID pandemic. Research began looking into a drone for public works at that time period, and the vision was created, a program to expand and modernize our existing program of bridge inspections. In particular, we sought to have licensed operators do routine inspection of scour critical bridges that we already are having to mobilize manpower to inspect, and also follow through with the development of infrared road scanning to be able to go fly roadways, find anomalies before problems happen, and try and take remediative action. So with all that research, we ended up moving into doing some validation and testing. So a small consumer level DJI drone was purchased to prove that concept shortly thereafter, probably in about 2021. And at that point, that put us into being one of, I think, if not the first public works programs in the state to use the drone. So it's been really exciting to really be at the front end of this and developing what the possibilities might be for us. So with that, I will move us forward here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the equipment that we use. So as I said, we initially purchased a DJI drone that was a Mavic Air 2, which that's a common drone you would see out in the world purchased by people. It served us well. It was a great starting point to prove that this program really had merit, that we could do something that would provide value to the city and to our public works community. But we were rapidly faced with the problem of the the drone ban on foreign-made drones that has come up in Connecticut over the last year. So even at that point, the talk of it had begun. We began to do research at that point to look towards buying a higher level enterprise drone, but with in mind the looming prospect of the Chinese drone ban, we made sure to research US made drones specifically. Ended up researching several of them. Turned out that research was very, very prescient and paid off well, that the Chinese drone ban did materialize. So as it stands today, the purchase of foreign-made drones is banned by state agencies starting in October of 2026. So just a little bit later this year, the purchase of any DJI or other foreign-made drones will be banned. And then the use of those in state agencies or any kind of municipal applications will be banned starting in 2028. So for any of those people who did answer yes to that they've been looking into drones, know that purchasing something like a DJI drone, which is probably the most common drone on the market, is still a possibility for you, but it has a pretty finite timeline on it. So our research then toward the US-made drone ended up with the Skydio X10, which I've found to be a very, very good product, a really capable piece of equipment. It's an enterprise level drone made in the USA. It has 3 front-facing cameras, a 64 megapixel narrow, 1-inch wide, and a radiometric thermal lens, and then features a whole host of sensors and autonomy features in it that really help it to shine against the competitors. Those cameras I mentioned, they offer a gimbal that's capable of panning from 90 degrees down, so that's straight down towards the ground, to 90 degrees up, straight up. And I make that distinction because it's common, many drones have a camera that faces down for taking photography of the ground, but it is not common to have one that has a camera facing straight up, which for our applications ended up being very, very important to focus on, because a lot of what we do is inspecting bridges. So the ability to be underneath a bridge and get a true view straight up at the deck and the underside of the deck is really important. Beyond the
Aaron,
yes,
we do have a question.
Oh yeah, of course,
In
please.
the Calpa, he says, do you Skydio drones have the dock station? We are currently installing infrastructure to support 2 rooftop and 1 ground pad dock stations for Bristol PD. Wondering about any issues you encountered in this equipment.
So the answer is yes. Skydio does offer a docking system for the X10 drone. We do not have one. I've seen some presentations and read some material about the use of them. It's most common in utility inspections, from my understanding. The big place that's being used right now is in power lines, for example, where typically they used to have to send out human operators in helicopters and boom trucks to inspect those structures. And so now they instead have these Skydio drone enclosures placed periodically along the route and are able to use that to inspect these long, long runs. So that being said, yes, having a docking station for your drone from Skydio is a possibility.
Okay, good to go.
Okay. So beyond the photography cameras that the Skydio drone has, it also features a total of 6 other cameras for sensing. So They're not readily visible in this photograph I have on the lower right-hand corner, but beyond those three front-facing cameras you see, there's on the top and bottom of the drone set of three each additional cameras, which are more similar to like your phone's camera sensor. They're only maybe like a quarter to a half an inch in diameter. And what those do is they allow the Skydio drone to leverage some AI and algorithm technology to offer lifetime obstacle avoidance. So while I'm flying, the drone is continuously looking around me, around itself, and it creates basically like a wireframe around itself to contextualize the distance to things. And it even offers a augmented reality overlay. So during a flight, I can turn a setting on and see lifetime this wireframe with a heat map basically that shows me distance to objects. So I have an understanding of what's around me, even if I'm not really close to the drone and able to see it. Beyond that, Skydio also offers a whole suite of attachments to go with X10 drone, and it's really increasing, I mean, pretty continuously. Every couple of months now, I'm getting a notice from them about some new feature or new attachment that's come out. So we have a package on the drone right now that offers us 3D scanning, mapping, and tracking. And that's through these attachments, one referred to as NightSense and one as RTK. The NightSense is an additional set of cameras and sensors that go on that is infrared based. So beyond those visual obstacle avoidance cameras I was just talking about, it's also using infrared to bounce that off of structures. So for example, under bridges in very low light environments, it enables us to have nice, clear vision around and a really stable flight. And as well, the RTK module, that's real-time kinematics, it's referred to as. So that is to leverage the capabilities of this drone for 3D scanning and mapping, take it to the next level then. It allows us to bring the accuracy down from, I think, approximately foot accuracy for the standard optical sensors. With the RTK, it allows you to then attach an extra antenna to the drone, pair it to a surveying base station on the ground, and leverage those GPS satellites from the survey base station to get the accuracy down into the, I think, inch or even sub-inch type range. Otherwise, for attachments, they do offer, like I had mentioned before, Skydio does offer a parachute attachment if you're interested in doing any flights over large crowds. They have a payload dropper, there's spotlight, and a speaker additionally. These attachments, we don't have any of them. They're generally geared more towards law enforcement and fire applications. So I'll move us forward here. We're going to play a little bit of a video clip. This is a clip from a pilot training exercise we did a few weeks ago, just demonstrating some of the autonomy features that the Skydio drone has. So this right now is utilizing what they call the reconnaissance and subject tracking feature. So I'm sitting in place with the drone right now. I'm able to activate this feature and choose right on the screen from an overlay. It uses that AI integration to recognize objects, people, cars, bicycles, things like that. And I'm able to pick them right on the spot and focus on that subject. So while this clip is running here, I'm holding the remote to the drone, but I'm not interacting with it at all. This is a completely autonomous flight path here. I was able to select this car that's driving around the Danbury landfill here and pretty much just let the drone go. I always have to keep the remote handy, of course, because you need to be able to intervene if anything were to happen. But it allows a lot more flexibility in what I'm doing. So while this is going on, the drone is taking care of following the car. It's taking care of focusing on the car. And I'm able to then focus on the camera and really make use of this camera. So this really, I thought, was a great demonstration just of what the power is. This drone probably has one of the, honestly, I think really across the board, it's probably the best camera I've ever seen on really any kind of electronics device. It is just so much clarity at long range, so much clarity at close range. It offers so much flexibility to see the different things that we want to. This is probably from in excess of maybe 125 feet in altitude at this point. And like, if it wasn't a bright sunny day, you would be able to read his license plate on the back of the car. It is just so clear. While that finishes up here, I'll flip over then. So this is a chance. This shows off some of the macro of the, or yeah, macro of the camera. And then this next slide, I wanted to just show a few pictures real quick that demonstrate some of the more micro views. So this is underneath the bridge deck here in Danbury. Some repairs were done a few years ago on some spalling in the concrete, and we were asked to go back in, do a flight underneath, take a nice video record of the underside, and analyze these spots, take a look at how those repairs are holding up. So you can see these three pictures from the upper right following down and around to the upper left. Those are all from a stationary point, the same views of the same spot. And at full zoom, I think this last picture at the bottom right is not even at full zoom. It is so much detail. You could practically count the grains of sand in the concrete right there. I always kind of joke about this in the backhand that this camera set is basically like a telescope and a microscope all in one. It really offers, I mean, the perfect level of flexibility. And to that point, and kind of back towards the question we got before talking a little bit about the Skydio drone, there is a couple of different camera options that are available for this that I should touch on. This camera package features the wide angle cameras and stuff for higher altitude flight. There's another camera package that I believe has a stronger telephoto lens that allows you to get a lot more clarity at zoom, which is, I think, geared more towards the police and fire applications where reconnaissance is a lot more common. So that's a little bit about the equipment that we're using. I'm going to get into some of the areas of focus that we've found in the past year that are the most important. The next thing I want to talk about with you all is about the airspace that we face. I talked a little bit about the FAA Part 107 regulations at the beginning. As part of those regulations, I would say like the Part 107 is geared towards drone, but they keep you pretty honest. There's a significant amount of more general aircraft knowledge that they require you to learn as part of that. And it really has to do with the fact that when we're out and flying, we're interacting with the airspace that has all these manned aircraft, and we have to make sure that we're safe and operate within their rules safely. So much of the state is referred to as Class G airspace. So what that means is it's unrestricted. That's open air. You could go and fly there with no warning at any time. We here in Danbury are not afforded the luxury of being in Class G airspace. Many of the airports in the state, especially the larger ones, Danbury's is not large, but is surprisingly busy for being small. Many of the airports around have restricted airspace around them. So when we're flying the drone, we have to yield to that. And if we are to fly in restricted airspace, we have to reach out to the FAA and get approval from them. So what that really means for us is that the idea of just going out on a sunny afternoon and going out flying is not really a possibility. Unfortunately, the FAA response is not immediate. Per their rules, standard approval for airspace clearance can take up to 90 days, which really puts a wrench into planning operations. My experience has been that in our area, at least, it's closer to around 3 days. So what that means is that when we're planning an operation, we have to make sure that we're planning ahead. When things come in, even if they're immediate, we have to look ahead, make sure that we're covering ourselves time-wise and yielding to that time, because we don't know. It could take a little bit longer. It's just one of the things that we have to sort of be conscientious of while we're flying, while we're planning our operations. For more routine things such as inspections, it ends up not really being a big deal. Those are rarely happening under any kind of serious time crunch. But one example of when it has come up is, I think sometime during this spring, we were given the opportunity to go out in town and support some of our law enforcement operations. There was a controlled detonation of some hazardous material that was slated to happen in Danbury, and we were asked if we could come out and actually come fly while that was happening, come spectate, witness that for them, provide a video record of it. Unfortunately, it came up on first things notice in the morning, and it was happening the same afternoon. So we had to decline. It wasn't an emergency of a caliber that would require reaching out to the FAA directly to try and get some kind of amended clearance or anything like that. We sadly were unable to go for that. So that being said, I'm going to flip over here and we're going to actually take a look at some of the maps. I just want to show everybody what the situation really looks like. So we've got two panels here. These are excerpts from the FAA sectional chart that shows all the airspace layouts in the state. So the left-hand area, that's the Storrs, Wyndham, Willimantic area around Yukon there. You're located in Class E airspace with a floor that's 700 feet above ground level. So what that means is that for most drone operations, you're really in the clear. As I had said in the beginning, our maximum altitude is only 400 feet above ground level. So in that area, you're generally able to fly to your maximum altitude without any airspace clearance required. The one exception to that would be if you're flying around something like an antenna, a mountain, a large structure. If you were to then go and fly around that and cross anywhere above 700 feet, you would have to reach out to the FAA and receive approval. Conversely to that, on the right-hand side, this is the airspace around us here in Danbury. So Danbury, as outlined by that dashed blue line, is located inside of Class D airspace, which extends from ground level all the way up to 3,000 feet. So what that means is that we're always flying in controlled airspace in Danbury. I'm not even sure if I could summon any. There's very, very, very few places in Danbury where you're not in controlled airspace, even to the point that the controlled airspace extends across the border into New York, and my house, which is just shortly across the border into New York, is even in controlled airspace. So I would have to get FAA approval to fly around my neighborhood. The airspace is something that is, I would say for us, it's just kind of a reality of life. It's not going to change at any point. If anything, it's probably more likely to expand and become more stringent. It's just something that it puts a little bit of a limit in the timing and sequencing of our operations. Just like with the turnaround time from the FAA, we can't operate immediately. We have to be metered and measured what we do, make sure that we're planning ahead. From there, I want to move into weather, talk a little bit about how that impacts us. So it's somewhat, my first bullet is maybe a little bit needless to say, but the weather is predictable and we have to work around it. I always kind of fall back to the backhand adage, if you need 3 hours, plan for an entire day of flight. If you need a whole day, plan for 3. It's proven very, very quickly in this, as I started really managing our operations and scheduling our operations, that it pays huge dividends to plan ahead and plan for more than you actually need. It doesn't cost anything to get the FAA clearance. It's much, much more advantageous to just go ahead, put it in, make sure that you're well covered so that if anything happens, if a rainy day comes through, that you're well covered and you'll be able to get there without having to wait weeks potentially to get more clearance to get there. To that end, you might start on a beautiful sunny morning. The weather can change during the course of the day. It can change in the days leading up to the flight. So liberal planning really does pay off. And that being said, the Skydio drone is extremely capable in poor weather. It is capable of flying in rain. It's rated to IP55 waterproofness, which is, I believe, pretty considerable. We try and avoid flying in the rain if at all possible, but it's happened a few times. You've been caught out there midair while it's wet, and it's performed very well. But if you're flying in those type of situations, you just have to be mindful of the fact that there's impacts to the flight performance from that. Something like rain landing on the craft, I mean, at the worst risk could eventually cause some kind of a mechanical issue, but even just in routine flight, water water sitting on the rotors can impact their aerodynamics, flight performance, and really cause you to consume your batteries faster. You're expending more energy to stay in the air. That all being said, though, bright and sunny days are not smooth sailing intrinsically either. Apologies. So this next slide here, this shows a little more of a advantageous situation. This is a bright, beautiful, clear, sunny day on Candlewood Lake here in Danbury, New Milford. These are the kind of conditions we really want to fly in. But that being said, not everything on a clear day is smooth sailing. Our drone is capable of flying in temperatures in excess of, I think, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which we're not in Arizona, probably will never get there, hopefully. But you do pay for flying in tough conditions. If it's 80 plus degrees Fahrenheit, you're subject to two things, really. One is that the drone is powered by lithium ion batteries, and anybody who has an iPhone would know on a super, super hot day, lithium batteries are very, very unhappy. They discharge quickly. So you end up using a lot more battery and having to plan to have a lot more batteries charged. And the other thing is more of a technical aviation term. It's referred to as density altitude. And that's basically, it's the equivalent density of the air where you are based on the pressure and temperature. So practically what it means is that the hotter and more humid that it is, the air becomes less dense. And so that's less air for the propellers to physically push off of, and thereby much worse flying conditions. Thinner air means that you're just as much in hot conditions, you're using a lot more battery to get through that flight. So in planning for a day, it's important to be mindful of that. How much battery you have, how much you can get off of a battery on a normal day, and how much reduction in that battery life you might face. We did a few weeks ago, we were invited out to go and fly for the installation of a large box culvert bridge that's being done in Danbury right now, which was probably one of my favorite flying experiences to date. And we'll get into some pictures of that in a little bit. But it was, I think, really the first time where I'd ever gone out and actually like flown an entire day from 8 to 5 or such and such. And it was really interesting to get out there, feel what it was like on a hot summer day, and find out that we don't have enough batteries. I went out there and flew. We probably get, I'd say 30 minutes to an hour out of a battery, depending on conditions. And we currently only have 5 of them in our possession. So I found out pretty quickly that I had way more time and way more desire to fly than I had batteries. So it really required a lot of thought throughout the day about when I go up, when I'm using those batteries, because I might go up and fly and have to wait 15 minutes, 20 minutes until something actually happens. It really required a lot of sort of paying attention to the site if you're really looking to capture critical moments. Had to make sure that we were charged, present, and up in the air when they were doing something like using a crane and setting the bridge in place. Another point of sunny days, like we see in the background here, is the actual sun itself can be a pretty significant problem when flying. You spend a lot of time looking at the remote while you're the pilot. You also end up spending a lot of time trying to look at the drone itself to make sure that you understand where you are situationally and that you're not getting too close to anything. The obstacle avoidance we have is very good, but it's not absolute, and you can't rely on it exclusively. But on these bright sunny days, it can be a real issue where you place yourself and where you're looking. If you're flying with the drone right in front of the sun, it can be a real issue to try and actually look up towards it. Sunglasses are, not adequate enough. So planning in where you operate from has become really important. And also the drone has a few features to help us with that. Big one would be it has externally mounted strobe lights on it, in addition to kind of red and green navigation lights like a standard airplane. It also has toggleable bright strobes that are capable of being seen for, I think, approximately 3 miles in the distance, which on a bright day, those really help a lot. And then also really on cloudy days too. As we saw in the equipment slide, the body of the drone is gray plastic. I don't really understand why it's like that. They conveniently colored it to look exactly like the clouds. So on a cloudy day, it can be very, very difficult to see and easy to get yourself lost out there. So the next thing I want to get into here then is kind of in parallel with the weather is the environment. And I make this distinguishment here between weather and environment because the weather can stipulate if you can fly that day, but the environment that you work in really is what controls how you fly. A lot of what we do is inspection flights. We're flying around bridges, inactive construction sites. It can be very complicated, very difficult spaces. It requires a lot of comfort with the equipment. And that's really what this year has honestly been about to me, is that this drone is it's an amazing piece of equipment, but it's expensive and I can't help but not be a little cautious about it. We have coverage, we have insurance and such, but I don't want to do anything bad. I don't want to end up getting into an accident or anything like that. So it's been a lot of just really pushing those limits, getting out there, getting into those difficult spots and finding out what it feels like so that we can do it in a pressed moment, in an emergency. We can go and fly with absolute confidence. So in the planning of an operation, there's a few different things that are really important to keep in mind about how you operate. Big thing will be structures. So the drone ultimately relies on radio for communication. When you're flying in areas, for example, like this background image right now, this is Cap Danbury landfill and an area that we use a lot for pilot training. This is like just about the ideal location. It is big, wide, open, clear sky. Not a lot to go after. You can see in the background, there's a handful of power lines in the area, but they're at a relatively low altitude. So this is probably about as good as it comes for those situations. When you're flying, for example, somewhere like Main Street, where there's tons of buildings, tons of traffic, people, infrastructure, it can be a little more complicated beyond the limits of the actual buildings themselves, the people who are around that you have to avoid. There's also communication issues that come up in densely populated areas. That radio reception that the drone receives is not absolute, and it's subject to interference from things like Wi-Fi, other radio communications, people changing their TVs, and anything really like that. So you just have to be conscientious of what's around you, how dense the area is, and really just be cautious when you fly. Get a feel for the area, traverse it in its entirety, understand how the drone performs in different areas.
Hey, Aaron,
Yes.
we have a question in the chat box from Jennifer Brady.
Yeah.
Generally, and if you happen to know, if not, maybe you can direct us to know where to find the information. Generally, what is the cost range with the unit without the add-on applications?
I'm not sure exactly because we bought a whole week package when we got the drone initially. We have some of their back-end cloud software and we got some attachments and extra parts. I think that the Skydio drone package is around $10,000 or $15,000, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, continuing on talking about the environment that we fly in and the challenges of them. This slide shows just about the best situation. This next slide I'm flipping to here shows a little bit more of what the day-to-day reality is like. So this is this flight I was talking about a few weeks ago. We got to watch the setting of a box culvert for a bridge. And this was, I mean, it was an incredible moment to be there, to see kind of the seminal part of a project like this happen. But it was a very complex and taxing day. This site is really, really busy. It's a busy road intersection that's being detoured right now for the entire summer. So there's a lot of traffic. And as you can see in the background here, there's just tons of overhead wires. There's moving people and equipment all the time here. So a lot of situational awareness is required. Caution, a lot of caution about where you fly, and a lot of caution too about where you yourself are placed. Flying, moving the drone while you yourself are moving is bad practice and not typically permitted. But nonetheless, I mean, you can see here, there's semis pulling in, there's excavators around, the crane around, a lot of moving parts. So you want to make sure that you yourself are in a safe location while you're working. A site like this is where we really start to leverage with our flight team here. So the flight team that we operate with, and under the FAA rules, the members of the flight team, you have three key groups. You have the pilot in command, you have the person manipulating the controls, and you have visual observers as part of the team. Now, this is a kind of a typical FAA fashion that the pilot in command and the person manipulating the controls can be the same person, but they're not necessarily the same person, which is kind of a bizarre concept. But what it really means is that, for example, in a flight, I might be the one who files the airspace clearance, who actually gets the approval for the flight and puts everything together. I'm on the record as the pilot in command for the day. I may go and fly the drone during the day. I may be the one to set it up, but I also might not. I could, for example, hand the remote off to one of our other pilots, Rob Barone, and he would then become the person manipulating the controls, but not the pilot in command. I'm the one who's still to answer for the operation. And then the third part is the visual observers, who they're really the most critical part. When you're working in sites like this, they are your second set of eyes. I can't always be looking around me. I have to focus on the screen sometimes. I have to focus on the remote and make sure I'm getting the right content. So they're there to either be around me or placed around the site and in communication with me to offer just really a holistic view of what's going on and make sure that we are operating in a safe manner at all times. Additionally, an important part of it is the staging, really where we set up, where we operate from. So I want to just I'm going to try and get the highlighter or the laser pointer to poke up here so I can just kind of point it out. But so this site, when we flew here, staging ourselves and our equipment within the site really just didn't end up becoming practicable. There was way too much going on, barricades being moved, things like that. We didn't want to go and set up ourselves to take off from somewhere and then go to land and find out there's a truck sitting in our spot. So as a result, we ended up making use of some of the additional areas. There we go. Okay. So we ended up working in this site. We ended up going over here behind the construction fencing and using this adjacent neighbor's yard. We ended up staging in this area, I think along this line here, placing our equipment here and setting up a landing pad out in the grass behind this tree or in this driveway, which is currently closed off. That allowed us to have some space to just exist, to operate, to work, get prepared without having to be right in the middle of the action. The next, I'm going to flip here, show you another video. This is from the same site here. This is from a few weeks prior. This is the pre-demolition inspection of this bridge. So this is a series of flights we did around this area and through the channel, actually flying right up the river, right underneath the bridge to take a record of everything before it was demolished to just have for perpetuity. You can see along the sides here, this is probably more like a maybe a month or two ago. The leaves haven't come out on the trees in particular yet. There's a lot of debris, a lot of sticks and twigs along the sides of this channel. This is a kind of site that really puts the integrated features of the Skydio drone to the test. The obstacle avoidance is good. It's not absolute. They very pointedly say in the literature about it, things such as twigs and sticks without leaves can be very difficult. They're just too narrow for it to pick up on. My experience has been that it's really good, that it's very, very capable, that they're really just kind of, they put that out there as cover for themselves on it to make sure that nobody does anything crazy reckless and ends up tangled in a tree. But it's always something that I'm very cognizant of. It's probably the hardest thing to navigate because it's the hardest thing to see. As well as the drone is passing underneath the bridge structure here, you can see a little bit that your overhead cover can be a real problem too. When you're doing something specifically like flying underneath a bridge, if the bridge is too short, there's a limit to the field of view on the cameras. Even though they have a very wide range, there's still only so much real estate you can look up and see from there. So it requires you to fly at basically like a minimum altitude right over the water, which from my experiences, it's been very good. It is one of the areas that you have to be mindful of, that the water is a clear surface or has kind of some light reflections to it. So things like the surface of water and mirrors, glass panes, things like that are not always a guarantee that the obstacle avoidance will see it. Sometimes the water is so clear it will see right through the water and see things on the bottom, which will enable you to get a little bit closer than you want to be.
Aaron,
Yes.
I'm just curious. I know in
Yeah.
my car when I'm backing up and I get a little close to something, I get a little alert. Does the
Mhm.
drone have that capability? So if you're in that like tight little space, will alert you to if it's getting a little too close to an object?
So it doesn't, but it kind of doesn't need to. And the reason is that the obstacle avoidance is unlike your car, the obstacle avoidance is kind of a continuously operating action. So it knows it knows where it's at, but it doesn't have to give me like a direct distance read or anything like that because when the obstacle avoidance is on, the best way to describe it honestly, it's like having a force field around yourself. And it really is like the obstacle avoidance in its standard feature is, I believe, a 2 foot radius around the drone. So what that would mean somewhere like right in this view, right up the channel from here, you can see this large boulder on the left side. So what it means is like when I fly up the channel, as I start to get close to that boulder, if I'm flying in the dead center and I come within 2 feet of it on the left, it just pushes me really. It allows you to kind of like really like a force field allows you to really just like kind of float around objects. It can be a little problematic though, honestly. Something like that, it's dependent on how well it reads the shape of it. So if it doesn't understand the full geometry or something like that, it might try and take you and you want to come up and over the top of something, but the easiest path is really to go around the side of it. It'll start kind of forcing you off and around that side rather than letting you go right over the way you want to, keeping that 2 foot radius. And also because they know that you sometimes you have to get into those more challenging and risky spaces, it is adjustable. So you can reduce the obstacle avoidance to a close setting, and that brings the distance down to only about 6 inches around yourself. And then from there, it can be fully turned off, which gives the pilot full control to get as close as he wants, but puts you in the position of the most risk. But I've managed to leverage the avoidance really effectively for doing things like bridges where you want to take nice, continuous, straight videos. It lets you kind of rely on that force field aspect. You can come in underneath, back up against a wall, and then just move yourself left and right and you don't really have to worry about getting too close to the wall. If it's a continuous surface, it's always going to be able to see that and it allows you to just kind of slide along the wall at an even distance.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So from here, we have taken a look at some pictures, some videos, and some discussion about where we've been. I want to get a little bit forward and talk about where we're going and what's next for us here. So building off of this past year of flights, we're really looking to bolster our program going forward and really continue this development. As it stands now, we've done, I'll say, probably, it's really been like a handful of bridge inspections so far. It's been kind of an as needed basis when things come up. We've been asked to go out, or when things are active and ongoing, we've been asked to go and do some recording. We're looking to really develop the program and reach a point where we're doing routine inspections off of our own schedule, taking a prioritized list of what bridges are out there, going out doing annual inspections and post-storm inspections. We have a handful of bridges in Danbury that are classified as scour critical. So for those bridges, I believe after, I think anything over a 100-year storm event, we're required to go out and do inspections. That's a pretty significant, taxing thing to have to mobilize teams to go out there and get underneath. It may require specialized equipment, it may require extended periods of time. We're looking to reach a point where we're itemized on what bridges are the most important. So after we catch word of any of these events happening, we have a plan in place. We're able to go out and fly our routine, take our record, and really save the city time and manpower hours. Additionally, to aid in that, we want to try and really develop the autonomous workflows that the Skydio drone offers us. I would say so far we're just starting to break the surface on it. We have been facing some technical issues with the drone, with communication with our computers in the office here and with the Skydio cloud. I'll say that I just got it resolved, I think literally last week. I just was able to finally get some communication between the drone and the cloud, which was really important because it's how you offload any kind of 3D scans or maps that you take. So we're just starting to break the surface on that and find out what the capabilities are like, what we can do. We're aiming to be able to use the 3D scans that we take and then use those exported probably into CAD software to do takeoffs from these 3D scans without having to have any survey crew mobilized for that, which I'm really looking forward to. And additionally from that, really, I'm really hoping to just kind of explore what the total capability is. It's possible to do map making with the drone, straight kind of, top-down flat views of a site. You're able to take sort of semi-3D volume scans of a site that are a mostly top-down view, but shows some of the topography of objects and things like that. And then also to do the full 3D scanning. And that I'm hoping to really use a lot for takeoffs, like I said, and also doing routine inspections of city buildings, things like our public works complex. We're hoping to go out, run 3D scans, take maps of the site, and then be able to come back annually, run that same mapping routine again, and take periodic progress scans so we have a record, just pure apples to apples to going forward. One of the other areas that we're headed towards that I'm really looking forward to for this coming winter is the thermal scanning. So far, the thermal capabilities of the drone, we've explored a little bit. We've done some thermal scanning of roofs, which I know is becoming a pretty common thing with drones. A lot of insurance companies are using that. The big thing that we're hoping to head towards is that we are hoping to use the drone in the wintertime, go out and fly roads where we have buried manholes from the sewer or where there's suspected problems with the road base, for example, and use the thermal camera, go out on some of the coldest days of the winter when those differences are the most apparent and visible. We're hoping to fly these roads, take video records with the thermal camera, and be able to identify these manholes and anomalies. And for the manholes, It's kind of a long-standing challenge that we've been after to track them all down. Right now, our surveyor goes out manually in the wee hours of the morning with a hand thermal camera and goes and measures and puts paint marks on the ground. We're hoping to be able to do this a lot more streamlined, a lot more autonomously. Fly the drone down the road, take a video, be able to go back to the office, review the footage, and bring it back with us to the field to then mark up locations, both for finding manholes and looking at the road, seeing any kind of anomalies, and really addressing these problems before they become issues like potholes or any kind of damage to the road base. The final thing that we're seeking to develop for our program, and this is the one thing that is, I would say, kind of the most aspirational right now, is the development of LiDAR technology. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with LiDAR in some capacity. I think I'm not sure if it's a T2, there's some seminars going on, I know right now, related to LiDAR. Am I correct, Regina?
I put in the chat box through our signals program on July 9th. We're going to have another coffee and conversation, LiDAR detection and practices, lessons from Connecticut agency. I did put the registration in the chat box if anyone wants to learn more outside of this webinar.
Perfect. I will most certainly be in attendance for that. I'm really interested to hear about it. And the reason being is that LiDAR is the one thing that I would say is a weak point in the Skydio drone versus the DJI and the foreign-made drones. As it stands now, DJI is selling an enterprise-level drone off the shelf that has integrated LiDAR scanning technology, and Skydio does not. So there's no off-the-shelf LiDAR for us to use for this drone currently. I'm exploring a little bit the possibility of some third-party aftermarket LiDAR systems. I don't really know what the possibilities are going to be on that. As a result, this ends up being a little bit of a longer-term goal. We may have to invest in some new hardware. I don't know if it's going to end up being a different drone itself, or time may play kind of well for us here. Given the amount of development coming from Skydio, they're a pretty new company and they're building their enterprise level program quickly. I would expect that a LiDAR sensing option is going to be forthcoming probably in the next couple of years. But they're not alone in this problem. There's no American drone manufacturers that I know of who are offering integrated LiDAR right now. So this is something that I would say is truly where we're heading. As it is today, not having the LiDAR has not been a huge concern to me so far. It's something that I'm looking forward to. It's something that I think will really fulfill the greatest potential of this program, but we have a lot of work to do before then. I think a lot of development to do and a lot of just structuring of the program and how we operate. There's a lot of different aspects to LiDAR, really any 3D scanning that you might do that requires a lot more back-end work. You know, taking the scan with the drone is one thing, getting the data out and turning it into something useful is a totally different thing and requires a different set of skills. But we are getting there, and we're really fortunate to be able to make use of our pilots too. We have a total of 4 licensed pilots right now, one who is in training and maybe in this call right now, and I hope we'll be getting licensed soon. We'll see. But our 4 pilots share a very broad range of skills. So 2 of us are Danbury engineering employees, and 2 are a part of our construction services division. So it's a broad range of skills that we bring to the table. So as we develop into these things like LiDAR, I'm hoping to be able to make use of some of our other pilots who involve more heavily in 3D modeling and CAD work to be able to really work in tandem and try and produce products from this. And just as much too, actually, with our surveying department, as this all works, we're going to be interacting with them a lot, using some of their equipment, the GPS bases and things like that. So there will also be someone who we work closely with as we develop this.
Aaron, I just want to make you aware we
Yes.
got to 11:02. So I just wanted to, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
Just
no,
give you a
that's
little
perfect.
time check.
I knew that I might get this way and run my mouth for a little bit too long, but this is actually my last slide, so that works out perfectly.
Oh,
So I think I will wrap up my talking right about there for drones in Danbury. I'm going to flip over here and say big thank you to Regina and Mary. Big thank you to Tom Hughes and Rob Barone for developing this program, for making this possible and giving me this opportunity. And of course, to the T2 Center in the city of Danbury as well. And thank you all for coming here. I'm really glad to have seen this many faces, a lot of them familiar in this.
Aaron, thank you. This is wonderful. I'm really happy that you chose to this for your Pay It Forward project. I did put in the chat box. I put the T2 Center's email address. So if you have any questions for Aaron, or we also have Jason Hughes on our staff, who is also a drone pilot as well, that can help with any questions. So if you have
Yeah.
any follow up on this,